Right, take 3. Possibly for the last time, it looks like, because Arne Slot looks increasingly likely to become Liverpool manager. But what are we missing when it comes to Arne Slot? Because there's more to him than just how he'll set up his side. So who is Arne Slot? Well, first off, he's a Pep Guardiola disciple in how he sees the game. Here's a quote for you. I got the impression Slot was watching FC Barcelona all day and night. Those are the choice words of Bert Konterman, who was Slot's technical manager whilst he was a player at PEC Zwolle. So his Pep Guardiola influence dates back more than 10 years, which is important to remember because there are early elements of Pep in the way that he sets up, which means that the 3-2-5 that Guardiola currently uses isn't really his thing, and it's actually more similar to another Guardiola disciple. I know there's loads, but he's actually more similar to Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta. And it all makes for pretty interesting discussion in terms of which Liverpool players Slot will want and which ones are going to be casualties. Moving from AZ Alkmaar to Feyenoord, Slot started out as an assistant manager at a few different Dutch clubs before joining AZ Alkmaar in 2017, again as an assistant. But in 2018, he was given the reins at AZ Alkmaar, and this is a period of time that actually tells us more about how he will change Liverpool rather than Feyenoord, which is where he's at right now. And the reason for this is because he started at Alkmaar, and then what he took over to Feyenoord is the interesting part of how he'll change things when he moves on once again to Liverpool. In his first and only season in charge of Alkmaar, he guided them to a second place finish, which was their highest league finish since they won the Eredivisie in 2008-09. And there's one word that is pertinent for how his sides play, but also how he is as a manager. And that word is not one that's normally totally utilised when you're thinking about Liverpool. The word's control. He has been described as a control freak by the media. But why is this actually a good thing? Well, when he took over at Alkmaar in December 2018-19, his side conceded a total of 42 goals. But in his first full season, 1920, Alkmaar only conceded 17 goals, which was less than when Alkmaar won the league in 2009. And in that season, they averaged 3.3 big chances per game. However, their top scorer, Myron Bodu, only finished the season on 14 goals, so was this a problem? Well, if it was a problem, it seemingly didn't bother Feyenoord, who quickly pinched the lad, Slot, from Alkmaar, despite Slot being linked to Tottenham at the time, you might remember. So this is the setup from the game that Alkmaar beat Ajax 1-0. And there's some elements from this that blew my mind, and they're elements that I think reveal who Arne Slot actually is as a manager. Because there's a theme here that followed him to Feyenoord and will definitely follow him to Liverpool. So a couple of things to note here are Jordi Clasie, playing at centre-back. Now, people will remember him from his brief stint at Southampton, but what they will also remember is that he's a centre midfielder. Not only that, he's 5'6", which there's nothing wrong with. I'm a short king myself. Actually, just a touch taller than that. But again, we're not shaming anyone here. And this is where we I feel like I have. This is where we learn a lot. I mean, I'm normally not taller than people, so shut up. This is where we learnt a lot about Slot's Guardiola influence. He essentially took what he did with Mascherano at Barca and he replicated it successfully. Slot is a believer that players can be moulded into different players through coaching, and Calvin Stengs at right wing in this image is a perfect example, but not at Alkmaar. At Feyenoord! Are you still with me? Okay, well, this is what it means, right? This is a Feyenoord lineup from their recent 6-0 annihilation of hated rivals Ajax. Now, the first thing to note is that Calvin Stengs is now an attacking 8, which is a symptom of Slot's Pep Cruyff influence. Geertruida is another example of this. He's naturally a right-back, had the season of his life last season at centre-back, and now he's thriving. He's over at left-back. The guy is crazy. And how this all looks on the pitch, well, it's fascinating, as well as quite exciting, actually. Just want to say we're getting near the end of the season, and I want to thank you all for your support. If you do want to be a bigger part of this community, please give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram. We'd love to get to 10k on Twitter as soon as possible. There's a link in the description. Go give us a follow on Twitter if you're feeling good, or if you spot any of the content that we put on there. Cheers. So now we're going to look at how his Feyenoord side play and why they're so good and what that means for Liverpool. And there will be casualties, but also some position changes that I think are going to shock the Premier League and all its fans, of course. Now, firstly, a bit of a weird one, because for someone heavily influenced by Pep, the goalkeeper distributions aren't Guardiola-like, and it was very interesting when we dug a little bit deeper. So the goalkeeper, Wellenreuther, is in possession, and he waits for the Fortuna forward to engage him and draw in the press. And what happens next was really unexpected, because the press gets successfully drawn, and the ball gets played to the right-sided centre-back. But then after drawing the press in, the ball gets played long and doesn't come off successfully. But the plan is to get the ball to Jimenez, who is the 6-foot-tall striker whose role is crucial in this side and could be problematic for Liverpool, which we'll get onto later on. So the centre-backs and the goalkeeper's role in this side are pretty straightforward, to be honest, and it's not as complex as maybe Amorim or Alonso, and you can see that Konate and Van Dijk, they're going to be taken to it pretty easily. I think Alisson too, he's very well suited. He's comfortable on the ball. He can be relied upon. But it's the fullback positions, that's where it gets that little bit more interesting though, because they're quite defensive. They don't stay up high in the initial build-up phase. And even when Slot had Vindal at Alkmaar, an attacking left-back, he sort of would never overcommit when going forward. And often Slot, he's going to instruct his fullbacks to become slightly inverted whilst in possession, whilst not overcommitting to attack. And this is where the first signs of Slot will appear. And whilst Trent would be absolutely exceptional in this area of the pitch, especially in a bit of an inverted role for the team, Slot, as we've already discussed, is not afraid to teach players new roles and adapt them to what he wants. And this is why Bradley actually might be used on that right-hand side and taught to play in a similar way to what we've seen from Pedro Porro, or of course you might have a new recruit. And besides, there may be another position for Trent later down the line. I think anything is up for grabs here when it comes to Slot, because as we've showed you, he's willing to mould players into something else or something that works for him. And it's worth noting too that sometimes Slot likes an asymmetric defence like Arteta, where the left-back is a centre-back. And so with that in mind, of course, Joe Gomez on that left-hand side could play at left-back at times to create that 3 that we've seen in the Premier League and all around Europe, exactly like Kivior has been used for Arsenal. So in these first few frames, we showed you that there was only one visible Feyenoord midfielder in the picture, and that was Mats Pfeiffer. A player who a lot of clubs are going to want this summer because he's essentially, well, he's like the Dutch Rodri. And in Calvin Stengs, Slot has shown that he doesn't mind bringing players in that he's worked with in the past. And that could be the same for Mats Pfeiffer. But for the purposes of this video, we're not going to go under that assumption because the player hasn't been bought, although it could be something to keep an eye out. And there might be a player that is already at Liverpool that Slot might love. Mats Pfeiffer plays as a single pivot for Feyenoord, and a lot of the play goes through him for one reason: because of his availability in terms of receiving the ball. It allows the two attacking eights within this 4-3-3 system to stay 10 to 15 yards higher. And this is facilitated by the fullbacks being inverted and being lateral options in the centre if needed. In this freeze frame, you can see how important Mats Pfeiffer's passing range is to the team. They trust him in possession, which means that they can stretch the pitch out in the wide areas. And this knock-on effect of this, or ripple effect, you might want to say, podcast available right now on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, it is that they are then able to make penetrative runs through central areas where gaps have been left. But importantly, sometimes they will just play a safe option. They're going to retain possession, recycle possession. Now, these runs aren't always made to hurt opponents and are instead made to create spaces and to just generally displace the opposition and make life harder for them. When I was chatting to Oscar Bob recently, sorry, I just drop that name there. He was talking about the time where Pep Guardiola absolutely killed him for standing still. You've got to make run after run after run after run for the team. And so that similar view, that Pep philosophy, it's something that Slot has in his philosophy as well. Next, we have an example of how everything we've just said comes together and why it's so important for the tactical style of Arne Slot. It's a little different though, because in this game, Pfeiffer played slightly further forward whilst Zerouki played as the deepest midfielder. But the principles remain the same. One of the fullbacks becomes inverted alongside the deepest midfielder, which allows the more attacking midfielders to play further forward, as you can see in Pfeiffer's and also Timber's position. Not that Timber, his brother. The attacking eights within this team are crucial, as they stay high and they allow the fullbacks and defensive midfielders to work the ball into the final third. And because of this, they thrive. Timber and Stengs have been playing there for the most part of the season, and their stats prove just how effective they are from an attacking standpoint. You got Timber with 7 goals, 8 assists, 13 big chances created, and 2.2 key passes per game. And Stengs, 5 goals, 10 assists, 11 big chances created, 2.4 key passes per game at the time of recording. Now, the heat maps of these two attacking eights also give us a really interesting insight into what the Liverpool midfield could be under Slot, and here comes the first big change of the Slot Liverpool team. Technically, and what he offers progressively, Mac Allister is very, very well suited to that defensive mid-role. And whilst he does have a lot to offer going forward, there are players slightly more suited to Slot's attacking 8 positions. And whilst Endo is good at defensive midfield, this role is all about being able to be technically excellent and control tempo, which Mac Allister is far better at. From the Timber heat map, we can see that whilst he starts as a left-sided 8, his role often sees him take up areas in and around zone 14. And for anyone wondering, this is zone 14 right here. And the midfield does become a bit asymmetric to facilitate this. Steng's heat map shows us that the right-sided 8 takes up slightly wider positions and is tasked with creation from those half spaces. So, for the left-sided 8, it's very similar to the Maddison role at Spurs, where he is essentially playing as a 10 in the final third, but as an 8 in the middle third. And I think the perfect person for that is Szoboszlai. I think this role is almost purpose-built for Szoboszlai, who has the skill set in his arsenal to get into these areas, but also get into zone 14 and score a few more goals, affect the game a little bit more. The right-sided role is actually perfect for 2 players, and it gives Liverpool room for a bit of flexibility. First of all, the first player is Harvey Elliott, who I'm actually really excited to see under Arne Slot. I think he lines up very similar to Stengs in his profile and where he's most effective on the ball. But the second option is what could shock a lot of people that aren't familiar with Slot. Step forward. Of course, we had to put him in the team. And look, he might go and be here. But he could be here as well. Alexander-Arnold. Now, I know he could easily play right back. But with his creativity, he's almost perfect for the right-sided midfield role, and Slot is the type of manager to test that out. Stengs has completed the second most crosses for Feyenoord this season, and it feels kind of perfect for Trent. May I? Go on, score one. Yay, if you're a Liverpool fan. Now it's time for the attack. And the most important player might not even be Salah, who some people have been talking about. Is there a decision to be made on him? Well, in this system with Slot, who instructs his players to play in those forward areas, the attack is so important for Slot. His whole style of play, not only because they are the ones who initiate the high press, but also where they pick up possession. And we've got examples of why both of these aspects are just crucial to Slot's sides. This is an example of why the high press from the forwards is crucial in their attacking output. Ajax have the ball here, and Minte, who's looking pretty fresh, isn't he? He's been pepperminting the goal. He's actually on loan from Newcastle, by the way. He initiates the press, but that's not the best part. The best part is the proactive movement from Jimenez, the striker. He actually moves into an offside position because he's already anticipating the ball being played to the goalkeeper, and this part of the super aggressive press from Feyenoord, where they gamble and where the ball is going, is super smart. It's also smart in terms of if they win possession, because he's very advanced and likely to be unmarked when coming back from this offside position. So this press is also reinforced by the midfielders, who play as high as possible, and because they are so high, the ball is won in the final third. And when they win the ball back in these situations, they attempt to get it into the box as quickly as possible, and they scored from this moment. But the attacking IQ from the wingers is what makes this attack what it is. And that clearly stems from being well coached, and this next move shows it perfectly. Minte makes a move inside when he knows he's not going to get the ball, which links back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of those constant runs and movements that need to be made. Now, he does this to create space behind the fullback and to be able to target the space at the back post, and this is why it's so effective. The Feyenoord players know that their instructions are to work the ball towards the wide players, and to do that, the central runs become so important. So Gertruda, who was playing as a right back in this game, he makes a dummy run through the centre, again to distract the fullback to create space for Minte at the back post. And here's the end result. an easy goal scoring opportunity for Minte, which he took. Did he take it with aplomb though? Yes, he did. The left winger Igor Paixão again has a similar role but with added instructions. Minte usually stays wide and sometimes will come central, while Paixão comes central frequently, which is supported by the left back sometimes making an overlap when needed. Again, those dummy runs if they're needed. Again, there is flexibility in the side to not be inverted all the time when it comes to the fullbacks, because Slot does leave room for adaptation. Because of this adaptation, Paixão has become one of the best in the league and has license to do whatever he wants pretty much. For example, he takes a shot from this position and it flies into the net. But he also has attempted the most crosses in the whole Feyenoord side because his role is very ambiguous and it can change on a game-to-game basis. Meanwhile, we've got Jimenez, who plays as a lone striker, and I think his role is fascinating because in recent times the role of a big striker has been relatively low touch and low involvement in general build-up play. And whilst Jimenez isn't the size of someone like Haaland, he's still used aerially very frequently when Feyenoord go direct from initial build-up, and he's great at that side of the game. But his importance to the side is how he joins build-up. He's not the type of striker to lean into a centre-back, and he'll actually drop off the centre-backs to find spaces to link the play, as we can see in this freeze frame. This is an important part of build-up for Feyenoord and Slot, and it requires a striker with a really good IQ and also good technical ability. Now, do Liverpool have that? Salah might not be the most important player in the attacking dynamic of the side, but the role Slot will have for him is perfect for him in terms of being on the end of goal-scoring chances and being allowed to stay high up the pitch. Minte receives 16.4 progressive passes on average, which is the most of any Feyenoord player to have played consistent minutes, and absolutely this is perfect for Salah. And, you know, that's been the criticism recently. His play all round has not been as good, but in terms of having someone to get on the end of something, look, he's still elite. And he's still coming back from injury as well. So one must beware Salah slander. On the other wing, it's a different role. It's a role that sees a lot of the ball, but also needs someone direct who can go both ways. Well, this feels pretty perfect for someone like Diaz. A perfect role for him. And it's very similar to what his role was like at Porto. Having the ability, and we've seen it, haven't we, in the Premier League. He likes to cut across sometimes and bang, but also he likes to go down the line and bang. Sounds weird, but you get what I mean. And I think the important thing when it comes to the succession and the sort of handing over of the torch to new players within the squad from the Klopp era is that more freedom could result in him being the guy, having that ability to move on. And actually, as he gets older, he needs to step into that role. He needs to become the guy for Liverpool. The striker position, well, it's a bit of a problem. I don't feel like Nunez has the composure to be effective in build-up play. He lacks some finesse compared to what Slot's used to in Jimenez. Therefore, I think it might be time for Gakpo. Gakpo could become the preferred option here because he's got that ability to drop deep. He kind of wants to drop deep a lot of the time. He's very similar to Jimenez in terms of technical contribution. Gakpo also has a 50% aerial duel success rate, which is actually better than Jimenez, but does he have the cutting edge in front of goal? Or will it even matter because will the goals be coming from the wide areas? Or do Liverpool need to go out and get themselves a striker who fits this perfectly? Well, Victor Gyökeres fits this role perfectly. Should they go and buy him, and why should they go and buy him? You can find out by clicking right here.